Well, hello and welcome to episode 33. We've got an amazing entrepreneur sitting and talking to us all the way across the seven seas. We've got Anindya Datta from Mobilewalla here with us. Hi, Anindya, how are you?
I'm good, Anirudh. How are you? And thanks so much for letting me spend this hour with you.
The pleasure is all mine. I think having someone with your background, with the amazing progress. I mean, as being an investor in Mobilewalla that I've seen, and all the lessons that you've probably learned in just the 11 years. I think most founders would probably take 4 or 5 ventures to go through that. You've done that all in one venture, and it's going to be a fun time going through what is obviously a very impressive history. So looking forward to an awesome session. Are we ready to go?
We are just fire away.
Okay, so great. I mean, you started your journey at IIT Karagpur, 1982 to 86, right? Graduated in 86. And I mean, this is obviously pre-internet days in India. I think India was probably not the right market for tech at that time. But what was it like to be, at an IIT Karagpur at that time? What were the ambitions when you got in?
So and I'm assuming there are I don't even know if there are any IITians of that era listening in, and they'll identify with this. So those days, by the way, so yes, this was pre-internet, and my first 3 years was pre-PC, right? So
Wow.
so basically, we were writing code on a PDP-11 machine. So in fact, in my first year, code writing was basically using punch cards, right? I mean, we would write code, punch cards would get produced. We have to take the punch cards over to the guy who fed them in. In fact, the first PCs in India, in fact, the first PCs in the world, and IITs were one of the first global institutions where PCs came in, was in my third year at Kharagpur, and not a lot was available there, right? So it was basically, so I wrote my first using of a personal computer was writing my final year thesis on it. And of course then I came over to Maryland. Yeah. So how it was, we were all so young, Anirudh, and we didn't know anything, right?
Yeah.
So my first job, the job I got from Kharagpur was a company that then was not that big, but has since become very, very successful. Was at HCL.
Uh-huh.
And I still remember my first salary was 2,600 rupees a month, which with those days was the solid salary,
Good
right?
amount of.
Yeah. So at that time, I would say from all IITs, including Kharagpur, probably 90% of students went abroad, mostly to the United States. Now, of course, people go different places. Those days were mostly United States for grad school, right? So there was this whole pipeline, right? I mean, you apply, and you apply, almost you don't know why you're applying. You're applying because everybody else is applying, right?
Yep.
And there was this whole, the letters would come in, and the postman would come in with the letters. It used to be January, February, March, and people were getting their admits and their assistantships, and I didn't know anything at that time, right? So I just Maryland was a good school. I just came for grad school to Maryland. So that was that. Those were, but the IIT days were probably the funnest days of my entire life.
That's what I hear. Like, I mean, I think the people in one batch, they just stayed together. I mean, I'm sure most of the people in your batch is still probably in a WhatsApp group together even today.
Yeah, you know what? We just did a call this Monday, and I think IITians like me retain affinity for IITs throughout their lives. If you look in Mobilewalla, we have a large number of IITians in Mobilewalla everywhere. We have IITians in our office in Atlanta. We have IITians in Singapore. We have IITians in our India office. Yeah, so very strong ties. My first real major venture investor was an IITian himself, right? Vinod Khosla.
Yeah, Vinod Khosla. Yeah, very true. Very true. I'm going to get into that story because I love the names of all the companies you've had, and definitely want to get into that. in a bit, and then you obviously went to University of Maryland. You did your PhD, I believe, over there.
Yeah.
Um, and and again, I mean, these are obviously times when you know, I mean, getting a PhD in information sciences and operations research. I mean, you're talking again. This is very early internet days. You know, what information sciences sounds very very fancy. I'm guessing for that time. Obviously, today it's a needed science. But were you imagining at that time that Mobilewalla would be as you would be the CEO of a company 20 years later, and millions and petabytes and that kind of data flowing through it?
Honestly, no, Anirudh, not at all. But but the seeds of my entrepreneurship. I mean, if I look back now, right? I mean, those days I didn't think like this. But if I look back, the seeds of what I've become was already there, right? Because even then, my first real interaction with technology was when I came to the US, because IIT was take classes, take exams, have fun, graduate, right? So my first interaction with technology was here. And I still remember, in my PhD, when I would do research, I still remember the first thing I asked my advisor, a very, very well-known gentleman in a certain area called Michael Ball, that, hey, when am I going to graduate? This is like my second day, right? And I still remember what he told me. He said that you'll graduate when you have taught me something I don't know.
Oh, wow. That's a really good one.
So he said that's what getting a PhD is in my book, right? I mean, you however little it is, you invent some new knowledge, right?
Yeah.
So I still remember, and even in those days, even though I did not know I'd be a CEO, I did not know I'd start companies, I did not know I'd sell companies, I did not know I'd shut down companies, but I felt most researchers work to, the global sort of research system, the compensations, the rewards are tied to how other people know about your research, how much you publish, how much money you raise, right? But as I was doing, I could feel, I was very restless. And for me, yes, publication was important, of course. But what was equally, perhaps even more important, was actually seeing it in practice. I did something cool. I wrote a paper. I ran some experiments, generated some graphs, which happened to be better than some other graduate student in another university I published. It was fun, but I wanted to actually see this in practice. Right? This I remember, and I was more inclined to dig deep into one thing and not just write a paper and move on to something else. So those translate into what I am now. I mean, that restlessness, but I was always restless. It was I needed to, hey, I've thought of something. Let me see how it works out, right? So that was always a thing for me.
I think there was another startup before Mobilewalla, which is called Wordster, right? That you began, and I believe Wordster is still an ongoing company.
So Wordster became Mobilewalla in a sense, right? So Wordster, so Wordster was. Yeah, so Mobilewalla started as a mobile app search engine, right?
Yeah,
which is like. So what happened, Anirudh, was my experience in Walking Stick was not good, and I still remember in 2008 April when I decided to shut it down. A lot of things happened, right? I mean, I had kept spending money on it. And I still remember, one day, sort of my wife looked at our bank account and said, "What's going on here?" Right? And you eventually come to this, and every entrepreneur knows this. You don't want to fail, so there's a time when you think, okay, if I do this tweak, it'll work. If I do this is going to work. And one of the deep realizations eventually you come to is that, hey, this is simply not going to work, right? So that realization for me was April of 2008, and I felt I just spent almost 6 months in India. I missed my daughter very much. She was like 10 years old at that time, And I, when I came back, I basically said, hey, I'm going to shut it down. I came back, and I didn't do anything for some time, and I just I don't know, obsessively spent time with my daughter, right? And at that time, I still remember what I did at that time was I bought her an iPod Touch. I don't know if you even remember.
Yeah.
So it was not yet a phone, right? It was just a music device. And then as soon as Apple started the iTunes App Store, it became sort of a game device as well. That all these apps came by, but it was not a phone yet, right? It was not a communication device yet. So, I bought her iPod Touch, and she, App Store opened, and they obsessively played with games. I still remember. I don't even remember if I can remember the name. There was one game that they used to play all the time. Shame on me for not. It was a very early iconic game. The stick figure kind of walking and running. So and she and her friends, this 10-year-old girls, right? They used to always play that game. And I said, why do you always play that game? And I still remember my daughter's answer. He said, "Well, and I hadn't really looked at the App Store until that time, right?" He said there are like 400 games in the App Store. Anirudh, now there are like 3 million, right?
Oh, yeah. There's 400 probably published every day.
There's 400 games. How do I know what else is fun, right? So I said, wow, that's and I was also getting a little creatively restless. I hadn't done anything for 6 months. And I went in and I went in and I tried to search, and I saw that App Store search was really bad. I mean, you if you went and typed in like mortgage, it would give you games whose title contained the word word mortgage, right? So I thought, solving this problem. But my daughter was asking, how do I know what else is fun? And of course that problem is 100 times now. So in many ways, Wordster or Mobilewalla, the entity name got changed, was started to solve that problem for my daughter. How do we find fun apps? And I thought one way to approach it would be to, clearly fun is a very abstract concept. You can't ask.
Yep.
But one proxy could be, so they were playing this game. I forget what the game is called. Let's call it X, right? So if you could ask people that play X, what else do they play? That might be one way of approaching that, right? So at least you are not saying what is fun, but you're saying somebody that plays one fun game, what else are they playing, right? And the implication that would be fun as well. So Mobilewalla was started, or Wordster was started to really find fun stuff, right? And at that, and at that time, even now, App Store rankings are very commercially driven. Okay, App Store rankings by popularity and so on and so forth. And then the next logical step, I said that, is it possible to really judge true popularity of these apps and like expose it? So that was what we did for some time, right? I don't know if you yet I hadn't raised money from Ian or you guys at that time. I was still running my own money. We were we were one of the earliest sort of third-party app search engines, grew very fast. New York Times started publishing our App Store rankings, right? A very large syndicated sort of publishing syndicate used to syndicate our rankings and our things across like 250 newspapers across the U.S. So that was how we got started. But quickly I realized that I would not be. It was very fun. We got a lot of PR, but generating a lot of revenue was not going to be easy, right? So imagine Google is Google because there are 6 billion searches a day, right?
Yep.
I mean, I could see, even if apps were to get very popular, it would be impossible just on an app store. If we got to 10 million searches a day, we'd be like capturing probably 80% of all searches in the world, right? And 10 million searches a day, you can't build a big company doing that, right? So that was when sort of the early kind of what Mobilewalla has morphed into. So then I said, then what do I do now, right? We have this interesting stuff. And really what I asked myself was, in order to do all this underlying semantic analysis and all of that, we were collecting a lot of data, right? Massive amounts of data. We had effectively built a crawler of app stores, which is very hard because it's not like a crawler of a website, right? You got to emulate being a user, and we build this complex system. So I said, all this data that we were getting, can we do something with it from apps, right? So that is when sort of, one thing led to another, and we are where we are.
And that's when the pivot happened, right? And you turned your attention to that mobile audience, like you said.
That's right. So imagine the pivot. And again, if you ask me when was Mobilewalla formed, the answer would be very different. So the entity Mobilewalla was formed in 2013, right? Okay. So that's when I think the first Iron money came in. That was when Madrona came in. But between this 2008 and 2013, Mobilewalla was a science experiment. This Worcester, blah blah, was a science experiment that I was doing, right? So the pivots are this, right? So mobile app search engine morphing to mobile advertising company effectively. So I said, all this consumer data we are capturing, how do I monetize this? Sort of, this is, I'm talking 2010 now, right? And 2010 mobile advertising was very hot. I think right around that time, InMobi raised like $200 million from software. And I said, wow, this is like a really cool area. And I said, let me try to leverage this, all this consumer data by doing apps. I said that, imagine Nielsen, Nielsen, Kantar. These guys have a lot of consumer data, and the big revenue thing is that they get money from TV advertising. So why couldn't we be the Nielsen for apps? So that was sort of, so that was the morphing into sort of mobile advertising. And then, and this is right on the time when we raised money, we grew very fast. And then kind of the bottom fell off, but at some point I realized that ad tech was a space that became very no, right? Raising money was hard. Ad tech, and they're very heavy payment cycles. Like you would get, so your thing would get used in January, but you wouldn't get paid until June because of. Let's not get into that. But if there are any advertising people here,
but it's a very important point because it was B2B sales, right? And many people don't realize the difference between booked revenue and received revenue, right? Or revenue in your bank account. If there's a huge time lag and you're using venture capital to fix that, is the most useless use of VC money.
Absolutely, and this is one of the main reasons why venture capital soured on ad tech. And at one point in time, yes, at the end, it's cash is king because you got to pay your salaries on time, right? And if you're getting in cash, so that was so mobile search engine to mobile advertising, and then the pivot, and then there are like little mini pivots, of course, but then sort of mobile data and consumer data, which is technically what we do now.
So maybe now we could talk about what is Mobilewalla today and what does it do?
Yes. So what Mobilewalla sells solutions, and I'm going to use the word solution, right? It's largely data, but we are also evolving to beyond data as well. So Mobilewalla sells solutions, data-centric solutions that allow companies to understand people better, right? But the value of that understanding is reflected in building better predictive models, right? So for instance, take, and I'm going to give you an example of a company that is not a customer of ours, right? Okay. So imagine Ola, right? So Ola deeply cares that every customer they acquire generates revenue for them, right?
True.
But that is not what happens. So I can tell you, for instance, that in the rideshare industry, only about 12% of all acquired customers become what is known as high value. 88% are non-high value. In fact, 45% are zombies, which is after they pass the customer acquisition test, they don't do anything with the company at all. Okay.
Wow.
Because of this huge skew. Now, this skew is of course huge in rideshare, but in every B2C company, Anirudh, this is true. Your distribution of revenue is not uniform across customers.
Say the Pareto principle. Top 20% will drive 80%.
That's right. That's right. That's right. In sort of rideshare, in companies like Ola and Swiggy and all that, it's very skewed, right? So what these companies care about is that, hey, when I acquire a customer, I want to acquire a customer who's more likely to be high value than not, right?
I see.
The way they do that is, and every rideshare company does this, the way they do that is they go use AI and machine learning to build models of high value customers. They have all this customer data, right? And they know what they've done. And they know that these are the people that were high value, these are the people that were not. So let me go build a model that says that if a customer has this and this characteristic, they're going to be high value. Same with every telecom company. Every telecom company is trying to predict churn because it's so competitive. So in this quarter, these are the people that I'm likely to lose, right? So what we go and tell these companies, right? So if we were to sell to Ola, and let me be very clear that other rideshare companies are, but Ola is not. So we would go to Ola and say that, hey, Ola, you have this team of 60 people that is building this model. This is so core to your acquisition and retention strategy. And your own data, of course, is incredibly important. But it turns out that there is information outside of your observational purview that is highly predictive of the outcomes that you are looking to predict. Like, for instance, it turns out that the number of times you have seen a customer, or a number of times a person has been seen at a non-home airport, meaning that if you live in Bangalore, the number of times you have been seen at Bombay and non-Bangalore airports in the last 90 days is highly predictive of how much money you're going to spend with a rideshare company in the next 180 days, right? So our pitch to this company is that there is a whole bunch of things that you don't know that predicts the outcome you're looking to predict. So if you combine the features that you create with these, your models are going to be much better, right? So that's what Mobilewalla does. Mobilewalla goes into companies and helps them build better predictive models by providing them predictive features which they don't natively have.
Wow, and that's amazing. So in a nutshell, this would, again, you can utilize your own data sets and what you're building as predictive analytics on top, and then get what Mobilewalla gives you, and then get an even better understanding of what you already know about your customers, and also know which ones to target better for the next 180 days for more business.
Yeah, and it's not just targeting. Imagine that and I'll give you another use case. Take in India in particular, your listeners will identify with sort of the whole P2P lending business, right? I mean, we have this company called Creds and Paytm lending, whole bunch of companies that are doing sort of small. You want $400, you go to them and they lend you that money, right? The problem is that when you lend someone money, one of the things you have to see is how likely is this person going to pay me back, right?
Very true.
In traditional banks, that is done using credit companies, right? I mean, you go to Experian in the US. If I apply for a bank loan, they'll go to Experian and say, okay, tell me this guy's credit score, right? The problem in emerging markets is that very large parts of the population either don't have any bank accounts at all, or their information is so sketchy that you can't generate credit scores for them, right? So all these companies end up using AI to build their own models using data that they get, right? So we are a fairly large provider of consumer information to these people as well. For instance, I can tell you, so one of my favorite clients, and it's got nothing to do with how much revenue we generate from them. But they're super smart and super cool, and they'll always have beer with me if I ask them to. So this is a very, very large company, fintech company, a unicorn in Indonesia. Okay, so it turns out that the average value of your handset in your household, right? Your phone handset in your household is highly predictive of how likely you are to default. Imagine that. So basically what we've done is we have created these features that are predictive of a whole bunch of things, and we go sell them.
That's amazing. In fact, one of our largest investments is in a P2P lending company, which is LinkedIn Club. Yeah, and I definitely will. In fact, even Tala I talked to you about, I think out of LA, and what they're doing in Kenya and all these African markets, and also in Asia. That's amazing. I mean, there's a lot of business connections that we could just do just from this conversation. But essentially, Anindya, what would be the size of an entrepreneur? Like, or what size of business would an entrepreneur need to be at before they should be approaching a company like Mobilewalla?
Look, so Mobilewalla's average deal size, right, is, I don't know, $170,000, right? Remember that our model is recurring revenue model, right? Because this information that we are providing you, we provide month after month after month, or week after week, or day after day. So, but we have clients that pay us. I think our smallest client pays us $60,000 a year, which is $5,000 a month, and our largest client pays us $100,000 a month, right? So they pay us 1.2 million. So fairly wide range, but we are basically, what we are trying to do, Anirudh, is relatively new, right? You won't find many companies saying that we will give you predictive features that will help you better models. So we definitely have interest in proving out use cases, and we won't go into it here, but to the underlying thesis of Mobilewalla is that there is a relatively small number of things that predict a whole bunch of things. Okay? And it's a big problem for modelers. And in order to prove out this thesis, I would be supportive of, if we can find interesting use cases to prove out, to do that at relatively, we have been very lucky that we have grown extraordinarily fast, and we have not. So there is strategic value to proving out cases, right? For instance, in the P2P lending case, it so happens that there are many companies that are fairly small, right? But I would love to prove out this P2P lending case across 20 different companies, right? So yes, we can do stuff for modest amounts as well. But if the application is strategic for us, and we can work closely with the data science team and so on and so forth. So we can do that.
And would love to connect you with some people like that. I do definitely want to talk about Madrona, but before I do that, I remember your update. I think at the end of 2019 or early 2020, and you were expecting a record year in 2020. Right. It was supposed to be your best year ever. I remember reading that and coming back to the family office council and being like, listen, we're going to have this massive company, and it's going to, obviously we patiently waited for this moment to happen, but it's going to be there. But I think no one predicted COVID, and things sort of derailed over there, and that entire process, right? Maybe you could give us. I'm sure it was your fourth innings as an entrepreneur, so obviously you were better prepared. But
sure. So Mobilewalla, and you know this, your audience doesn't, because you've received updates. So it took us a while to get to sort of the type of revenue we want. This is the always-on recurring revenue. It took us a while. The company was formed in 2013. And our first always-on revenues were in 2016 second quarter, and you can go back through your reports and you'll see it. And in 2016 Q2, we did $50,000 of gross revenues. I still remember that. Okay. And then in 2019 Q4, right? So 13 quarters down the line, we did almost $3.5 million. Crazy growth, right? 70 times in 13 quarters. And if you look at sort of the annual growth, And you're listed, and we made all the, the Inc. 5000 year after year, the Deloitte Fast 500. So generally, hey, one of the fastest growing SaaS companies. And imagine that we have done this with so little cash, Anirudh. I mean, most companies that are you'll find that raise 70, 80, $100 million. We've done it $25 million of preferred capital. That's all we have raised, right? So we finished 2019, and I think we did $11.2 million gross in that year, but crazy growth. Like our ARR grew like 3 times across the year, right? So in 2020, we were projecting something like $18 million, so 17 and a half. So, and this is under a no raise scenario. Basically, we won't raise, if we do not raise money, we're going to grow like 70% on top of and we would end the year with a 20 million ARR, which is awesome, right? So we met Q1 plans, and then Q2 and Q3 we did so bad, Anirudh. We did so. I mean, I don't know how many SaaS people are listening to this call. So in SaaS, it's all about new MRR ACV bookings. That drives everything. I mean, if you have good bookings, your revenues are going to be good. If you have poor bookings, your revenues are going to be bad, right? So our highest new MRR ACV bookings was in fourth quarter of 2019, and we did $1.4 million of bookings, right? Which means we brought in $1.4 million of new business. In Q2, we did $330,000. It was so bad, so bad. So new business acquisition like really screeched to a halt. In Q3 also we did very poorly, like 530. And we ended up and you are the investor, so I'll let you judge. I mean, you know the performance. We ended up 2020 effectively flat with 2019, right?
Which is an amazing end. I mean, considering obviously where we were in the middle of it.
But Q4, growth came back, right? So imagine in Q4, we did $936,000 of new revenue, new MRR ACV bookings, which was like an 80% growth from Q3. And this quarter, with Q1, we've done almost $2 million of bookings. So wow. Biggest quarter ever. So growth is back, and as we say in India, from my mouth to God's ears. But we are very hopeful this year.
And I guess what would be a key to why this growth could happen now? I mean, like how do you keep the team motivated to have this kind of a record quarter?
Two very, very sort of. So I'll tell you a story. So Laurie is sitting across from me. Okay, I mean, she's listening to this. And when you ask that question, how do you keep your team motivated? She made this motion, which means that she's telling I whip, which is very untrue.
I can hear it.
So two different questions. The only reason we came through this, and Anirudh, we have come through this without raising an additional dollar. I've not gone back to my investor asking for more money, right? Even though we missed our plan like hugely. Is cash management, right? So I'm just, I've been around enough to know that even though tomorrow might be incredible, even day after tomorrow might be incredible, next week all hell could break loose. I just know that. And I know that will happen. Okay, so nothing. What goes up must come down. What you hope is it goes up and comes down less, and it goes up again. So we just plan that way, Anirudh. We just plan that way, right? We plan that way. We keep cash. We clearly invest. Otherwise, we wouldn't grow. But also we fail very fast, and that's one of my learnings. If something is not working. Instead of, sometimes I'm sure we make mistakes. So that's one. I think cash, how you manage becomes, and how you manage, how you anticipate becomes very important. Luck also is very important. I mean, we just did this quarter, we did one deal for $936,000 and one deal for $727,000, right?
Wow.
One of those deals could have happened. There's some luck. And the way I kept the team motivated, and again, I'm not really going to take much credit here. What I do is I do not whip, even though Laurie says I whip. I try to show the path. I don't BS, right? I say, hey, this is what's going on. And if we do this, this is where we'll be. And you can see that we are not in jeopardy, right? So that's one. But at the end, Anirudh, the way you get through this is we are super lucky in Mobilewalla to have 5, 6, 7 people, Laurie being one of them, that are sort of so enmeshed in the DNA of the company that I truly believe. So they live and breathe Mobilewalla, right? I mean, so when something really awful happens, I don't think their first thought is, oh my God, what happens to me? I'm sure that is their third thought. They're humans, but their first thought is, how do I go fix this? What do I do, right? Without that it just, can you imagine through this, right? We through this, we have not lost a single key exec in the company. So I don't know how much credit I have for that. I mean, but definitely culture. This is where culture comes in, right? People say, what is culture? Culture is not ping pong table or lunch. Culture is basically how people think.
And I'm so much running out of time, but I need to ask you this question: how do you create that culture? What is the key to creating such a culture?
That's a very difficult. So I get this question asked, and then all my companies have this culture, right? So I'll tell you a story that can. So I don't know how I create this culture, but if this culture happens, this is what happens. So in Chutney, I hired a guy whose name I won't say. I think he's even listening. He'll know who he is, but I won't embarrass him in front of others. So we hired this guy from Karagpur, and he was really, really good, right? So we made him an offer. He accepted, and then he wouldn't sign the thing and send back, right? In this time, he was coming to the office. He was interacting with us. He was even writing code. I mean, 3 months went by, he wouldn't sign the thing. So I said, fine, listen, I'm in the US, of course. So, and I thought that he was in. And then one day, Sanjay Chatterjee called me and said that, hey, this guy has not, we are not paying him. He's coming and spending 6, 7 hours in the office every day. What's going on? So I called him. So he handled. So it turns out that his problem was, and Laurie won't identify with it. It's a uniquely Indian problem. So what he told me was that he had a girlfriend at that time, and which was very good for him. And I said that he said that, look, one of my biggest issues is my girlfriend's dad. And they were fairly young at that time, but the girlfriend's dad has an issue with me joining Chutney. And I said, why? And he said, he and I don't know how much Calcutta, everywhere in India, there's this whole thing, your kids go to certain schools and so. And he said that her dad says that if we ever get married and have kids, the Lamartiniere is never going to admit the kid of a person who works for Chutney. So what happened afterwards is that I said, okay, but I need you, so let me talk to your girlfriend's dad. So I still remember I was in Kolkata that time. I went to his home. I spoke to. So this I call him uncle. I mean, he's a big fan of me now. I spoke to him. He joined. But that's culture, Anirudh. This guy, whatever we do, this guy was for 3 months. He was coming to the office coding. He wouldn't take another job, even though he was not able to. So it's that glue, right? It's that shared passion, shared intensity. That's what it is.
And like you said, it's actually those 6 7 people, or that core group.
That's right.
It's from there, and I think it just percolates down all the way. And again, I could honestly have gone on for another hour, and we have so many topics to talk to you about. But I think one last thing I want to ask you before we get to rapid fire is, when you look at your set of investors, and I think Madrona has been there since the very start, and they've been there through the ups and downs and the pivots and all of it. And I think, and obviously, I haven't interacted with Madrona, but I've learned a lot about them from just your update about how they've been there. Wanted to understand from you, like, how do you keep an investor like that? And for many of our young entrepreneurs, right? Because many of them are thinking for maybe a 5 or 6 year kind of a timeline, but something like Mobilewalla, 11 years, right? It takes. I mean, we all know 10% of businesses ever make it. No, 5% of businesses probably make it to 10 years in business, and you've kept an investor almost there for the entire journey. What
2000,
is the key?
very honest, 2013, Anirudh. So,
Yeah,
so they've been there for 8 years, but 8 years is also a long time.
a long time in the VC world. That's like that's like 2 decades, right?
So again, a very good question, and goes back to my original. So I would think that I now, and to some extent, this comes from self-awareness, and that's something that's super important in entrepreneurs, knowing who you are. So I am very picky with investors now, Anirudh. I probably turn down more investors than investors have turned me down, at least in the case of Chutney. Now, this doesn't apply to many of your first-time entrepreneurs, because experience, and my track record gives me some leverage that others don't. But if you take that aside, your board and your investors, your early investors, are so critical, simply because you interact with them all the time.
Yeah.
And your mindset is greatly impacted by how those interactions are. When things are good, it doesn't matter, right? But in startups, most of the time things are not good, because even if things are good on a week by week basis, so one advice I have for every entrepreneur is give investors bad news very quickly. It's just I mean, I cannot overemphasize in fact, I not any, but I go to the extent of writing an email as soon as something bad happens. So your weekly meetings, or if the investors is very harsh, if they do not understand, or if they approach it from berating the entrepreneur rather than trying to understand and let's see how we solve it, the entrepreneur leaves with a mindset that is very bad, and that impacts a whole bunch of things afterwards, right? So Madrona is one of the and I'm talking about as a firm, right? I think Scott Jacobson, who I love, who's on our board, who's from Madrona, is probably one of the harsher investors from Madrona. I'm sure Scott is but even so, Madrona as a firm is one of the most entrepreneur-friendly firms that I, and really the way you keep them is, at the end, if they believe that what I hope, and Madrona has never told me they believe this, but I hope the reason Madrona has stayed with us to thick and thin and through very difficult times is because they believe that there is a multi-billion-dollar company in Mobilewalla, right? I mean, that's I other than that, there will be no reason, right? They have never once come to me and told me that, hey, let's look at selling the company. Not once, right? It's and I should also say that the second round investor, GCP, Boris Guten, has also been fantastic, right? But Boris didn't quite go through the hard times that Scott did, of course. So it's basically the investor believing in you and the investor believing in the company, right? I mean, that's so important, so important. And it comes through little interactions. Do you bullshit the investor? Do you do you say things that often, even if you're not bullshitting, are you saying things that often don't happen, right?
Yeah.
At the end, if the investor trusts you, right, and if they're if they have the right kind of personality, I think that's one of the most powerful combinations that can happen.
And I think that's in getting the right investor on board, like you said, that chemistry can become the most powerful combination. I think that's a perfect way to end the conversation for us today, because I really want to take it to. I mean, there's just so many lessons, and I hope in the next 6 months we can again bring you back and we can carry forward the conversation from here, because I mean, as a B2B SaaS entrepreneur, and you've pretty much been in that B2B space for the better part of 2 decades. And it's a big growing space in India, right? I mean, we invest very heavily into B2B SaaS, and I can tell you that these lessons are profound. I think Vinod Khosla, who is a partner with us here in the fund, has been waiting for you to come to India, because so he can talk to our B2B SaaS entrepreneurs and really give them a feel of what it takes to build a firm like Mobilewalla. Because I think if there are firms that could even do 10% of what you guys have done, I think you've got a $1 billion company like that. So and Mobilewalla, in fact, is one of my first 10 investments in my life. I mean, like you asked me before the show, I'm at number 90, but it's always been one that's been very close to heart. Something that you've been the most regular updater, I would say, as an entrepreneur, and I've been now coming on 29 quarters, I think, with you. And it's always been there. That's one of those updates to read, and it's something I've taken even as an investor myself today, to update my own investors on a monthly and quarterly basis. And thank you so much for all the lessons. But before we let you go, I do have the rapid fire. But before I get there, any final thoughts before we go to rapid fire?
This was so much fun. This I don't get to do this, right? So this is a rare sort of fun break for me, because if I was not doing this, I'd be talking to bank trying to borrow money or something, which is way less interesting than this. Yeah.
No, and we really enjoyed it. I think there's a lot of interaction that's already happened, but I'm sure once this video goes, the video once it posts, there's going to be a lot more interaction over there. So and many entrepreneurs that I hopefully will reach out to Mobilewalla for their help in building.
One thing I'll say though is that we are looking to hire heavily, right? And because Mobilewalla has very significant operations in Asia, which of course we are interested in all kinds of. So we are very interested in smart people, right? We are interested in, and not just tech, right? So we are very interested in very smart business people, and I don't have a lot of time to say, but basically, if you feel at the end, Mobilewalla is in a very emerging area. If you feel you can connect dots, talk to us, and I'll just say that we pay like crazy.
And Anindya, what's the best way for people to get in touch with you for jobs or for
they can just write to me, Datta@Mobilewalla. I mean, if you just share my
Datta
Datta@Mobilewalla.com. And have them reference the Damani talks or something. So at least I get so many. So that
So I'm going to ask the team to just make sure they put a banner on the bottom, but that's the best way to get in touch with Anindya. And I'm sure even if you're a founder out there looking for advice, again, this is another way to have somebody who's been there, done that, has been there since the start of VC. Even I mean, the real growth of VC that happened in the early 2000s in the US, and I'm sure there's a profound amount of knowledge available. So Anindya, now I'm sorry, I've got to keep you another 10 minutes to go through rapid fire, and then we'll be done for the day. Are we ready? So simple rules. It's just whatever first comes to mind, just go ahead and say it, and that's it. I know Laurie's over there probably just thinking, what am I going to ask? But I'll keep them relatively harmless. So I guess the first question that I'm going to ask you from the rapid fire, which starts right now, is one thing that you know to be true, but very few people agree with you on it. It's a Peter Thiel question.
Mobilewalla will be a $10 billion company.
Oh wow, Decacon. That's it. I think I can end the interview right here. This is the end of rapid fire. uh, and I mean, I honestly, I do believe that. I because I'm on the other side and going through it, and I think we have all the ingredients. Just a bit of luck and with her, like
A
you said.
lot of luck, yes.
Yeah. If you could pick the brain of any one person for 24 hours, and you could ask them anything you ever wanted, right? Who would it be?
It would not be any. So this is, I'm not going to, this requires some thought, but I'll tell you, it would not be anybody in technology, right? But somebody who's really, somebody who's experienced life. I don't know, Stephen Hawking, Dalai Lama, people like
Mhm.
that, who have succeeded in things where I have failed very deeply. So those are the places where, those are the people that I would pick.
So, and I guess a connected question to that would be one piece of advice you would give to your 18-year-old self.
Always keep your suitcase packed.
All, why is that? That's a very unique answer.
Because you never know. There is a very sort of literal answer to that, because I've traveled a lot. I live in Atlanta, but if you forget last year, I don't think I ever spent more than 3 to 4 months a year here, right? So I spent time in Singapore. I spent a little bit of time in India. So there's a literal answer that I'm always on the move. But what I was trying to say is that suitcase, for me, a suitcase is a metaphor for motion, right? When you move, you take a bag, right? So
Yeah.
so so I did not quite anticipate when I was 18-year-old how much motion would be necessary, literally and figuratively, as an entrepreneur.
It's very deep thought behind that. I now that I mean, think about it. I think most entrepreneurs would probably be traveling, like you said, every 3 or 4 weeks. You're on the move, whether it's on a flight or otherwise, but you're always on the move. Good. I'm going to ask you two more questions, and that's so. What is one thing that you never leave the house without? And I know it's going to be mobile, but anything else?
Yeah, I mean the only thing I can think of is my I also almost never really leave. I mean, if I'm going to the grocery store, without my computer either, but my mobile device, yes.
Mobile device. Uh, yeah, okay, I'm going to ask you because that was a very easy question. I'm going to ask you the best and worst piece of advice you've ever received.
Best piece is hard to say, man, because I've received so many good pieces of advice. One of really, I did not. A lot of people used to advise me to not dwell on things and fail fast, right? It's
Mm.
almost a cliche, but it's one of the things that I have learned to be one of the most. So entrepreneurs succeed by not succeeding, right? Entrepreneurs succeed by not failing. That's that's
Yeah.
that's basically. So failing fast is one of the biggest keys to being alive. The reason we one of the key reasons we came through COVID was we failed fast. So that's probably one of the most key pieces of advice. One of the worst pieces of advice I've received, I won't tell you who gave me this advice. Um, Mobilewalla's first head of sales, who I hired in New York, and I'll say this openly, his name was Hugh. And he left. He left after some encouragement to leave, and I did that based on certain pieces of advice I received. That's probably one of the, at least in the last 7-8 years, that's probably one of the worst pieces of advice I've done, and one of the worst mistakes I've made.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I
No.
think it's very important to make your own decision. I've always believed that entrepreneurs should be able to listen to everything, but decide on their own. And that's a profound piece of advice. I guess last question: 3 books you would recommend to founders to read.
This is so personal, man. Look, I read a lot of fiction. Right? I
Okay.
read a lot of fiction. Uh, if you're talking about things that can help you in your entrepreneurial journey, the books by Michael Lewis are very, very good, right? I mean, next thing, Moneyball, those just his books have been some of the most well written things from which I've learned, right? But I do massive amount of fiction reading, and I love crime. In fact, I don't know if you know this. This is my last. This is my last company. After this, I'm going to make movies. At least that's my goal, right?
Oh,
In fact, I have
wow.
a screenplay written, right? So I love what are known as noir books, noir novels, right? So I love novel, so an author who I love and whose books I wish to make into movies in India, by the way, is an author called Jim Kane. He's written books like Double Indemnity, Postman Only Rings Twice, then one with this name of a woman, not Rebecca, of course, I forget. So those are some of my, I don't think an entrepreneur would gain anything by reading those, but at least I'm telling you, those are some of my favorite books. A Swedish author called Henning Mankell. So those are some of my favorite books.
James Kane. Did I get that right?
Jim Kane, yeah, James Kane, but
Jim
it is
Kane.
Jim Kane, yeah, Cain.
See, I am. Fantastic. I mean, thank you so much, Anindya. This has been, I didn't even realize we're 30 minutes over.
Yeah.
We told the audience we'll be 10 minutes over, but it's been such an engaging and such an amazing conversation. I think I could write blogs for the next month just on what we've talked about today. But, honestly, I believe with you at the helm at Mobilewalla, it won't be a long wait before we will see a unicorn out of this company and a decacorn, like as you believe. But before we end, any final thoughts for the audience, which has
No,
done.
I thank you, thank your team. I mean, this was really fun for me, and it was a great way for me to spend, what would otherwise be a very boring lunch hour.
Absolutely. I'm glad we could do that. And thank you so much. Thank you so much. And again, like we said earlier, if you want to reach out to Anindya, the best way to reach out, Datta@mobilewalla.com. And if you're looking for a job at Mobilewalla, if you're looking to partner up with Mobilewalla, and if you're looking for pieces of advice, I mean, this is an encyclopedia right here.
Just
You've got
looking
the
to
email.
have a coffee or a beer or a wine. I'm going to visit my mom at the end of this month. So definitely I'll be in India for a couple of weeks at least. So sure.
Would love to hear what she thinks about you becoming a movie producer at the at the end of the journey, which started off with Chutney Technologies. This is going to be a great autobiography to look forward to. Thank you so much, Anindya. Good night, everybody, and a good day to everybody in the US.